So there I was, floating in the observation deck of the Galactic Council's newest diplomatic vessel, watching what was probably going to be the most embarrassing moment in human history. And let me tell you, as a Vrelixian cultural analyst with 14 years of experience studying these bizarre primates, I thought I had seen everything. I was wrong. Dead wrong. The human delegation had just arrived, and naturally, they brought weapons. Because of course they did. Humans and their weapons go together like xantharium crystals and explosive decompression, which is to say, predictably and with spectacular results. Commander Thex-9, our lead security officer, a 7-foot-tall Chromoth with mandibles that could crush titanium, was currently holding what the humans called a katana. He held it like someone might hold a dead fish, dangling it between two claws with obvious disgust. This, Thex-9 announced to the assembled council members, his translator struggling with his clicking laughter, is what humans consider a weapon. The council chamber erupted in chittering, buzzing, and various other sounds that universal translators interpreted as laughter. I will admit, even I cracked what passes for a smile among my species. The sword was primitive, ancient, a length of folded metal with a handle wrapped in some kind of fabric, no plasma core, no molecular disruptor field, no quantum entanglement targeting system, just metal. It is a ceremonial blade, said Ambassador Marcus Webb, the lead human diplomat. He was a tall man with grey hair and the kind of weathered face that suggested he had seen too many council meetings just like this one. A symbol of honor and tradition from Earth's history. A symbol. Thex-9 clicked again, and I swear his mandibles were trembling with amusement. Of what exactly? Your species' inability to move past primitive metallurgy. More laughter. I glanced at my datapad, recording every moment for my research. The humans had been part of the Galactic Council for exactly 3 standard years, and in that time they had been the source of constant entertainment. They were tough, I would give them that. Survivor, but technologically, they were children playing in a sandbox while the rest of the galaxy built monuments to the stars. But then something happened that would change everything. A small human walked into the chamber. I do not mean small for an adult. I mean small, a juvenile. The humans called them children. This one was female, barely reaching Ambassador Webb's chest, with dark hair pulled back in what I had learned was called a ponytail. She wore a simple blue jacket over a white shirt and dark pants, and she carried a bag over her shoulder. Ah, Webb said, and for the first time since entering the chamber, he smiled. This is Keiko Martinez. She is 11 years old, and she has been studying Kenjutsu, the art of the sword, since she was 6. 11 years old. By Vrelixian standards, that was barely past the larval stage. Thex-9 looked down at the small human and then at the blade in his claws. You have brought a child to demonstrate this primitive weapon? What is she going to do, Ambassador? Cut through paper? Perhaps perform a dance? The laughter intensified. Even I felt a twinge of second-hand embarrassment for the humans. This was not going well. But Keiko Martinez did not look embarrassed. She looked calm, impossibly calm. She walked forward, and here is where it got interesting. Every species in that chamber, from the crystalline Hytharians to the gaseous Nephrons, stopped laughing. Not because they were impressed, but because the way this small human moved was wrong. Wrong in a way that triggered every predator instinct in every sentient being present. She moved like liquid metal, smooth, purposeful, each step perfectly balanced. May I have the sword, Commander? She asked, her voice polite, almost cheerful. Thex-9 handed it over with a flourish, clearly expecting some clumsy display. By all means, small human, show us what this piece of antiquated metal can do. Keiko took the sword with both hands. She bowed, which I had learned was a sign of respect in several human cultures. Then she turned to face a structural support column about 15 feet away. It was made of compressed durasteel, the same material we used for starship hulls, strong enough to withstand direct hits from meteor strikes. That column, she said, still in that cheerful voice. May I use it for demonstration purposes? Be my guest, Thex-9 said. his mandibles still trembling with suppressed amusement. "Try not to hurt yourself." What happened next took approximately 4 seconds. But I will remember it for the rest of my considerably long life. Keiko drew the sword. The movement was so fast that my optical sensors could barely track it. One moment, the blade was sheathed. The next, it was out, gleaming under the chamber's artificial lighting. She took 3 steps forward, a strange gliding motion that seemed to defy normal bipedal locomotion. Then she swung. The sound was unlike anything I had heard before. Not the hum of a plasma cutter, not the buzz of a laser blade, just a whisper of metal through air, so clean and pure that it seemed to slice through reality itself. She completed the swing, held the position for exactly 1 heartbeat, then smoothly returned the blade to its scabbard with a soft click. Nothing happened. X9 began to laugh again. "Very impressive, small human. You waved a piece of metal through the air. Shall we give you a medal? Perhaps a certificate of participation?" Keiko turned to face him. She was smiling, not a nervous smile, not an embarrassed smile, a knowing smile. "Commander," she said, "could you please tap that column?" "Tap it?" X9 looked confused. "Why would I?" "Please," Keiko insisted, "just tap it." Still chuckling, X9 walked over to the column and rapped his claws against it. The top half of the column slid off and crashed to the floor with a deafening clang. The cut was perfect. Diagonal, smooth as polished glass. Through durasteel, through material designed to withstand the vacuum of space and direct weapons fire. The chamber went absolutely silent. I stared at my datapad, then at the column, then at the small human holding the ancient sword. My primary brain was trying to process what my optical sensors had recorded, while my secondary brain was busy having what humans would call a panic attack. "How?" X9 whispered, his voice stripped of all amusement. "How is that possible?" Keiko sheathed the sword completely and bowed again. "The blade is folded steel, Commander, folded over 1,000 times during its creation. The edge is sharp at a molecular level, but the sword itself is only a tool. It requires years of training, discipline, and understanding of body mechanics, leverage, and the transfer of kinetic energy." She paused, and that smile was back. That terrifying, knowing smile. "Also," she added, "it helps to know exactly where to cut." Ambassador Webb stepped forward. "The sword, Commander, is not primitive, it is refined. Humans spent centuries perfecting this weapon, this technique. We learned that sometimes the simplest solution is the most effective. You do not need a plasma core to cut. You do not need a power source. You just need knowledge, skill, and discipline." X9 was still staring at the column. Half of it was now lying on the floor, the cuts so clean that you could see the molecular structure of the metal along the surface. "This changes things," muttered Councillor Rex, a Saurian diplomat known for her tactical analysis. "If their children can do this with primitive weapons, what can their adults do?" "Oh," Webb said, and now he was the one smiling. "Would you like to see what our adults can do with primitive weapons?" The silence in the chamber was now suffocating. I tapped notes into my datapad with trembling appendages. This was not how this demonstration was supposed to go. The humans were supposed to be embarrassed. We were supposed to laugh at their primitive way. Instead, an 11-year-old had just casually destroyed one of the strongest materials in known space with a piece of folded metal. "Perhaps," X9 said slowly, carefully placing his words like someone defusing an explosive device, "we should discuss the cultural significance of human martial arts in greater detail." Keiko Martinez, 11 years old, barely tall enough to reach the weapons rack, nodded politely. "I would be happy to answer any questions, Commander. My sensei always said that knowledge shared is knowledge multiplied." She looked around the chamber at all of us. Vralexians, Chromaths, Hytherians, Nephrons, Saurians, species that had conquered space travel while humans were still figuring out agriculture, species with technology that could reshape planets and manipulate quantum fields. And somehow, in that moment, we all felt very, very primitive. The council chamber remained frozen in uncomfortable silence for what felt like an eternity. I watched as Councillor Rex slowly approached the severed column, her reptilian eyes analyzing the cut with the intensity of someone re-evaluating their entire understanding of physics. Molecular precision, she muttered, running a scaled claw along the edge. Without computational assistance. Without targeting systems, just biological calculation and muscle memory. Kay stood patiently, hands folded in front of her, the very picture of calm. Meanwhile, every diplomat in the room was having the same realization simultaneously. We had miscalculated, badly. Commander Thex-9 cleared his throat, which for a Cromoth sounds like grinding gravel. Miss Martinez, you said you have been training since you were 6 years old. That is 5 of your Earth years, correct? Yes, Commander, Keiko replied, though my sensei says I still have much to learn. He has been practicing for 43 years, and he says he is barely scratching the surface of true mastery. 43 years. I did the mental calculation. That was longer than most species spent in military training. Longer than I had spent studying xenoanthropology. And this human considered himself barely competent. What kind of species dedicates half a lifetime to mastering a single weapon? What kind of species teaches their children discipline that most adults in the galaxy could never achieve? And more importantly, what kind of species smiles politely while demonstrating they could kill you with a piece of sharpened metal? Perhaps, Ambassador Webb said, sensing the shift in the room's atmosphere, we should discuss why humans still practice these ancient arts. Councillor Thex-9, you asked what this sword symbolizes. The answer is not simple, but I believe it is important. He gestured to Keiko, who reached into her bag and pulled out several objects. A wooden practice sword, a small book with worn pages, a photograph. When humans developed advanced technology, Webb continued, we did not abandon our history. We remembered that technology is a tool, but discipline is a foundation. The samurai code, Bushido, taught honor, loyalty, courage, and self-control. These are not primitive concepts, they are timeless ones. Timeless, repeated Thex-9, and the sarcasm was completely gone from his voice now. You are saying that your species intentionally maintains combat training from your pre-space age? Not just combat training, Keiko interjected, holding up the photograph. It showed an elderly human man in traditional robes, standing in a garden. This is my sensei, Master Taiki Yamamoto. He taught me that the sword is not about violence. It is about understanding yourself. Every cut requires focus. Every stance requires balance. Every form requires patience. She placed the photograph down gently and picked up the wooden practice sword. Before I ever touched a real blade, I practiced with this bokken for 2 years. Thousands of repetitions. The same movements over and over until they became part of my nervous system. Until I did not have to think about them anymore. Muscle memory, I found myself saying out loud. Everyone turned to look at me, and I felt my bioluminescent patches flush with embarrassment. But I continued anyway. You are describing the development of autonomous neural pathways through repetitive action. It is not magic or primitive instinct, it is sophisticated biological programming. Exactly, Keiko's face lit up. My sensei says that the body remembers what the mind forgets. When I cut that column, I was not thinking about angle or force or molecular bonds. I was just cutting. Because I have cut that same way 10,000 times before. 10,000 times, for one technique. Councillor Rex spoke up, her voice carrying that careful tone that Saurians use when they are recalculating tactical assessments. Ambassador Webb, how many humans practice these ancient combat forms? Webb smiled. Oh no, that was not a good smile. That was the smile of someone about to drop another bomb. Millions, he said simply. Kenjutsu, the sword art that Keiko practices, is just one discipline. There is also karate, judo, taekwondo, kung fu, muay thai, boxing, wrestling, and hundreds of others. Some focus on strikes, some on grappling, some on weapons, but all of them teach discipline, respect, and the efficient application of force. Millions, Thex-9 repeated. You have millions of civilians trained in hand-to-hand combat? Well, yes. Webb said. But we do not really think of it as combat training. We think of it as personal development. Parents enroll their children in martial arts classes to teach them confidence and self-control. Adults practice to stay healthy and challenge. It is cultural, recreational and philosophical all at once. I was typing furiously on my datapad now. This was unprecedented. Most species outsourced violence to specialized military castes or automated defense systems. The idea of widespread civilian combat training was not just unusual, it was borderline insane. Let me understand this correctly, Councillor Vrex said slowly. You teach your children, your non-military population, combat techniques that have been refined over thousands of years. Not because you are at war, not because you are preparing for invasion, but because you value the discipline itself. Yes, Webb confirmed. Is that so strange? Strange? Thix9 made a sound like choking on gravel. Ambassador, most species separate their warriors from their civilians for psychological and social stability. You are telling us that any random human we encounter might have decades of combat training. Well, not any random human, Webb said, but a significant percentage, yes. The implications were sinking in. I watched as every councillor in the chamber had the same horrified realization. Humans were not just survivors or lucky primitives who stumbled into space travel. They were a species that had weaponized discipline itself. Keiko raised her hand politely, like she was in a classroom. May I demonstrate something else, Commander Thix9? I am almost afraid to say yes, Thix9 replied, but he gestured for her to continue. Keiko set down the sword and the bokken. Then she walked to the center of the chamber, bowed again, and took a stance. Feet apart, knees bent, hands open. This is a basic karate stance, she explained. Karate uses strikes and kicks. No weapons, just the body. She moved through a series of techniques, punches that snapped out like coiled springs, kicks that whistled through the air, blocks that looked like they could deflect starship debris. Each movement was crisp, precise and frighteningly fast. But what got everyone's attention was when she stopped mid-form and looked at Thix9. Commander, you are worried that humans are dangerous, that we are violent. But that is not what martial arts teach us. Watch. She completed her form, then stood perfectly still, breathing normally, completely relaxed. The hardest thing my sensei ever taught me was not how to fight. It was how not to fight. How to remain calm when someone insults you. How to walk away when someone challenges you. How to control anger and fear and pride. She picked up the photograph again. Master Yamamoto is 87 years old. He has trained in karate for 70 years. Do you know how many times he has used his skills in actual combat? Everyone waited. Twice, Keiko said. Once to stop a robbery when he was 20. Once to protect a student from an attacker when he was 45. 70 years of training, 2 moments of actual violence. He always says that the best fight is the one you avoid. The chamber was silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence, thoughtful, contemplative. Ambassador Webb stepped forward. This is what we wanted to show you today, not that humans are warriors, though we can be when necessary, but that we understand the weight of violence. We train ourselves to be capable of it so that we can choose not to use it. We teach our children discipline so that they grow into adults who value peace. That, I said, still typing notes, is possibly the most terrifying and admirable thing I have ever heard. Webb laughed. Thank you, I think. Councillor Vrex moved closer to Keiko. Young human, may I ask you a personal question? Of course, Councillor. If someone threatened you with a plasma weapon, and you had only your sword, what would you do? Keiko thought about this for a moment. I would try to talk to them first. Ask why they were threatening me. See if we could resolve the situation peacefully. And if talking failed, then I would defend myself, but only as much as necessary. My sensei taught me that true strength is knowing when to fight and when to yield. Wisdom beyond your years, Vrex said, and there was genuine respect in her voice. Thix9 picked up the katana again, but this time he held it properly, with reverence. I apologize, Ambassador Webb, and to you, Miss Martinez. We mocked what we did not understand. This weapon is not primitive. It is refined, perfected, and the culture that created it has much to teach us. Webb nodded. Apology accepted, Commander. And perhaps this can be the beginning of a cultural exchange. We have much to learn from the galaxy, but maybe we have some things to share as well. Indeed, Rex said. She turned to address the entire council. I move that we establish a formal cultural studies program with the human delegation. If their children possess this level of discipline and skill, we need to understand their development and education systems. The motion was seconded immediately by 3 other councillors. I sat back in my observation seat, my data pad full of notes that would probably form the basis of my next 5 research papers. The humans had walked into this chamber expecting to be laughed at. Instead, they had fundamentally changed how the Galactic Council viewed them. Not as primitive newcomers, not as lucky survivors, but as a species with depth, complexity and traditions worth respecting. Keiko was carefully placing her sword back in its bag when another councillor, a Nephron named Wisp-7, floated over to her. Young human, the Nephron's translated voice echoed. I must know. What is the most important lesson your master taught you? Keiko smiled. He said that the sword does not make the warrior. The warrior makes the sword. Anyone can hold a weapon. But it takes wisdom to know when to draw it and courage to know when to sheath it. She bowed one final time to the assembled council. Thank you for allowing me to share my culture with you today. I hope that we can all learn from each other and build a future where swords are remembered for their beauty and discipline, not for the violence they can cause. As the council session adjourned and the various species filed out of the chamber, I approached Ambassador Webb. You planned this entire thing, did not you? I asked. Webb grinned. We had a feeling the council would underestimate us. Humans have a saying, never judge a book by its cover. And never underestimate a species that teaches philosophy through combat, I added. Exactly. I watched as Keiko Martinez, 11 years old, walked out of the chamber with her sword bag over her shoulder. She was chatting happily with her ambassador, probably asking if they could stop for food on the way back to their quarters. She looked like any other child. But now everyone knew better. The samurai sword was not primitive. It was a reminder that sometimes the oldest ways are the wisest ways. That technology and tradition are not enemies, but partners. That true strength comes not from the weapons we carry, but from the discipline we cultivate. And that humans, those strange primates from a little blue planet, had been teaching these lessons for thousands of years. We should have been paying attention all along.